All right, so we're talking about the idea tonight that God is present. And I don't think that's a concept that we struggle with intellectually. In fact, if I were to take a quick survey, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hands and then leave them up for a moment, all right? So if you believe that God is present in your life, spiritually, physically, mentally, in any way present in your life, raise your hand. All right, keep them up for just a second. Put your hand down if you have ever struggled with that concept at some point in your life. Or excuse me, if you've never struggled with the idea that God is present in your life, put your hand down, right? And we all keep them up. Why? Because at some point we are running into this idea, we run into a problem, we run into a scenario where we don't feel like God is present in our lives. Well, it's easy enough for us to understand from a certain point of view, right? We can all read about how God is present in our lives. But it's not always as easy to feel it. We only have to look at what happened to Elijah. What happens to Elijah? God is definitely present in Elijah's life, right? How do we know that God, how does Elijah know that God is present? What's that? Okay, he took care of the widow. I meant more like God talked to him, right? God is present in Elijah's life. The word of the Lord came to Elijah, and Elijah spoke. God was very present in Elijah's life. And yet, there came a moment when Elijah didn't feel like God was present in his life, didn't it? When he was threatened, when he was feeling like his life was in danger, when he felt like there was no reason for him to continue the work that he was doing, he panics. And he runs away. He didn't feel it at that moment. So, we need to kind of explore that gap between God is present, and I know God is present, and I can reconcile the difficulty of God being present in my life. Is there anyone who's willing to share? What is it that at the moment that you felt that God wasn't present? What shook that for you? Nobody wants to go? All right, I'll go. There was a time in my life when I was significantly younger than I am today, but I was on my own, and I had experienced some things in a church at the time where I didn't think some people were doing what they ought to be doing. And they were in leadership positions. And I wanted to talk to them about it, but I was turned away. I didn't feel like God was present in that moment. It became all too easy for me to say, well, I guess I should give up because I can't talk to anybody about this. Now, were there people I could have talked to? Of course. But at that moment, in that moment, the people that I wanted to talk to about it, the people that I felt like should have been the ones to take care of those things, didn't. And it shook me. And it made it so for a time that I didn't want to be around people who were doing those kinds of things. Have you experienced anything similar? Maybe you have. Maybe you have your own story about what shook you, what made it feel like God wasn't present in your life. But let's read Psalm chapter 46. We'll start with verses 1 through 11. Make sure this is working. I can't remember which one goes. There we go. So we want to start with the idea that God is present to protect us. That He's here. Now, how many of you, again, show of hands, how many of you were in my Esther class? Oh, good. All right. How many of you weren't? I won't do that to you. I'll say how many of you weren't in my Esther class, and we'll see if nobody raises their hand, right? Where is God in the book of Esther? He's not mentioned. Yeah, right. He's not mentioned. And that's one of the things that we went over. So if God isn't mentioned in the book of Esther, how do we have a sense of God's presence in the book of Esther? Like we mentioned Elijah. It's pretty easy to see God's presence there. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah. So Esther goes on this huge journey, and not journey, but spiritually speaking, her journey from nobody to the queen. And then she's asked to go save the people by appearing before the king, and in a moment, she says to Mordecai, I don't think I can do that. Why not? What's her protest? Yeah, she hadn't been summoned by the king. If you haven't been summoned by the king, I could be killed. Unless he extends the scepter to me, unless I find favor in his sight. And does anybody remember Mordecai's famous reply to that? Okay, and he never actually mentions God, but he does say, this is your time to act. And if you don't, someone else will step forward and salvation will arise for the Jews from some other place. But as for you and your household, you will perish. Don't imagine that you'll escape this just because you're a queen. And so Esther says, fine, if I perish, I perish. I go to do it. God is in those kinds of statements. The providence of God was one of the things that we talked about, one of the things that we looked at in the book of Esther, that God is present for the Jews, even though he's never mentioned. And why is that a powerful concept for us? Well, God doesn't speak to me. Has he spoken to any of you? I don't see any hands going up, so that's good. God doesn't speak directly to us anymore. He speaks to us through his word, certainly, but the word of the Lord hasn't come to Aaron Holladay, and presumably never will, and that's okay. Like Esther, he's still present in our lives, even if he's not speaking to us directly, even if he's not taking a direct hand to intervene in the things that we can do, and we can still see the pattern of the things that God has done for us. So, God is present to protect us. Can I get somebody to read Psalm chapter 46, verses 1 through 11? Go ahead, Steve. I missed Josh over there. I'll get you next.
Psalm 46, verses 1 through 11. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolations on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress.
All right. How many times in there did you count the Lord is with us? The Lord is present. The Lord is our help. All throughout this, it's woven in there. To David, God was present. How does David feel the presence of God? From the very first moment that we meet David, what's happened to him? Yeah, he says, you come to me with a sword, I come to you in the name of the Lord. That was David's weapon. It was God who was going to fight for him. And David is depending on something really interesting here. Why did David believe that God would fight for him? Okay. Excellent point. So David had past history to draw on. God is with me based on my past history. Is that something that we can do as well? We can look back at our lives and we can say, look at all these places where God was with me. And I can draw on those past experiences that I've had, and I can see how God has helped me through them. What else? What else is David depending on? What's in the scriptures in the Old Testament? How does God describe his relationship with his people? Okay. He says, I am a deliverer, I'm a protector, and by the terms of the covenant, he says, I will do what? What does he tell the people as they're entering the land? Who's going to fight for them? Are the people going to fight? Sure, the people are going to fight, but who is going to be on their side? God. He says, I will fight your battles. I will fight for you. So what else is David depending on? He's depending on what? Promises. Exactly. He's depending on promises. Do we have any promises that we're going to be protected by God? Yes, absolutely. So we have past experiences. We have promises that we can depend on as well. All right. What does this do for us? Look at verse 2. What does it specifically say that this gives us? Courage. We will not fear because God is with us. God's presence gives us courage. Can you think of any people in the Bible who felt the presence of the Lord and had courage as a result? Okay, Jonathan, great example. Jonathan didn't fear Saul, his own father, the king, because he feared God more. Who else? Moses didn't fear the Egyptians, instead chose to fear God and to serve him. Who else? Okay, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. That's their Jewish names. I always prefer that, because if we're going to call them Daniel, we should call them by their Jewish names too. Otherwise, it'd be Belteshazzar, right? All right. Daniel, jokes aside, that's great. Daniel and his three friends are great examples of people who, under pressure, felt the presence of God. In fact, his three friends allude to that. As they're being thrown into the fiery furnace, they say, our God is able to save us. And even if he doesn't, we still won't serve you, because we're serving God instead. Go ahead, Steve.
How about Caleb and Joshua?
Caleb and Joshua.
2 out of the 12 spies. The other 10 perished, then those two lived.
Yeah, how many of us like being the minority opinion on something? All right? Imagine, I've never actually gotten to serve on jury duty, right? But there's 12 people on a jury. So imagine you've got a jury, and 10 people say, wow, we all think that guy's guilty. Have you ever seen 12 Angry Men? I love that movie. Right? And there's the one guy on the jury who he won't agree with the rest of them because he says, that guy's not guilty. I don't know. We haven't seen have we examined the evidence that they gave us? They're all ready to judge him guilty. And one guy out of 12, or two guys out of 12, in this case, they're going to have a dissenting opinion. And they're the ones that are right. But it's pretty hard to have that dissenting opinion when there's 10 out of 12 loud voices in the room saying something else. Are we experiencing any of that today? Are there any loud voices in the room that are saying something completely contrary to the things that we hold and believe in? Every day and every hour, yeah. You don't have to, the internet is a cesspit. You don't have to go far on the internet to find 10 people with very wrong opinions about important things. Right? And they're very loud about it too, and very angry about it. if you don't agree with them. So, have courage. We have no fear because God is on our side, because God is present. It's okay to have a dissenting opinion. God will fight for you. How about over in verse 10? What's another thing that we gain from this? Peace. You think of anybody who is under severe duress that had peace because he felt that God was present? Okay, Daniel, certainly. He was calm by all appearances when he's arrested for praying. And he's taken away, and Darius says, I have to do this. And Daniel says, it's okay. God's got me. Who else? Saul, Paul, whichever you prefer. Yeah, absolutely. He's at peace with the things that have happened to him. And boy, he had a violent life, not because he was violent, but violence done to him. And related to Paul, we had somebody else, not related by blood, but related in terms of story, Stephen. Stephen's pretty calm about the whole being stoned thing. Don't think I would be in the same shoes there. I might be panicking a little bit more than Stephen was. Jesus, well, yes and no. He's pretty distressed about the whole thing, but he's calm at the end, and he goes through with it. But he's distressed about it beforehand. But yes, Jesus, he felt the presence of God, and that's why he went through it. It gives us peace because God is our refuge, our stronghold, our fortress. What do those images bring to mind for y'all? Safety, right? You don't build a fortress and not feel safe in it. If you do, you built your fortress wrong. Let's turn over to Isaiah chapter 41. Isaiah chapter 41, and Josh, will you read verses 8 through 14 for me? Sorry I kept you waiting there.
But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend, you whom I took from the ends of the earth, and called from its farthest corners, saying to you, you are my servant, I have chosen you and not cast you off. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Behold, all who are incensed against you shall be put to shame and confounded. Those who strive against you shall be as nothing and shall perish. You shall seek those who contend with you, but you shall not find them. Those who war against you shall be as nothing at all. For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not, I am the one who helps you. Fear not, you worm Jacob, you men of Israel. I am the one who helps you, declares the Lord. Your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel.
We've got a song in our books, How Firm a Foundation. These are some of the words in that song. I'll strengthen you, help you, and cause you to stand. The words of Isaiah repeated in our songs, I love that song because of Isaiah chapter 41. What's he doing for the Israelites here? They're going to be carried off into captivity. They haven't yet, as of Isaiah's writing, but what's God telling them? He's with them. It's okay. Even though you are being carried off, even though you are in distress, it's okay. I'm still there. Have we been promised the presence of God? All right, what tells us that? Where is that promise given to us? Okay, Hebrews 13, I will never forsake you. How about the presence of Jesus Christ? What verses talk about the presence of Jesus Christ? I will be with you always, even unto the end of the age. What about the famous verse that we always talk about? Wherever 2 or 3 of you are gathered in my name, there I am also. It's easy to read that, right? But how many of you were thinking, what, Jesus Christ is here, in among us? And yet that's what he promised. That's what he said. He is here. He is with us. Let's read Matthew. Let's flip over to the New Testament. Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 through 13. Can I get another reader? Nobody wants to read tonight. I can read it if nobody wants to. Matthew chapter 6. Oh, did I see a hand go up?
I got you.
All right. Go for it. Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 through 14.
Pray then like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you.
Okay. What do you see at the end there that he says that indicates, as part of our prayer, that God is with us? That God is presently helping us. I'll give you a hint. It's in verse 13, but I have to put my reading glasses on to see it. What does he say? Deliver us from evil. That is a present active verb. What does that mean? Ongoing. It is happening now. He is delivering you from evil. You can pray for that. It's okay to pray for that. God is present and delivering you from evil. And he wants us to talk to him about our need for that. Okay? How about 2 Samuel 22, verses 31 and also verse 36? Or how about 31 through 36? 2 Samuel 22. Anybody? Okay, got a reader. Kurt, go ahead.
As for God, his way is blameless. The word of the Lord is tested. He is a shield to all who take refuge in him. For who is God besides the Lord? And who is a rock besides our God? God is my strong fortress, and he sets the blameless in his way. He makes my feet like hinds feet, and sets me on my high places. He trains my hands for battle, so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. You have also given me the shield of your salvation, and your help makes me great.
You see David's thoughts in there? God is his shield. God is his fortress. It's just like what we read over in Psalm chapter 46, or the 46th Psalm, if you prefer. So what's the overall point here? Why do we need a protector? Why do we need a fortress? Why do we need a rock? Why do we need help? Okay, that's great. We have an enemy. So there's somebody out to get us. Satan roars like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. We have an adversary. Are we able to overcome the adversary on our own? No, we need help. Okay, so acknowledging that we're not enough to take this on ourselves is a great first step in acknowledging that we need God. Is a great first step towards feeling more secure if we're able to ask God for help. Now, I want to make a point here, a little different than what Jacob wanted to make, but that's okay if you agree with Jacob. I'll tell you what both sides of this are. Now, Jacob says that this is by grace. It's God's gift to us, that he doesn't have to do this for us. And I agree with that to an extent. But I also want to make the point that God made a covenant with you and I. And that covenant has some terms. They're God's terms. He's the one that set the terms. And I also don't want to make this sound like religion is transactional, right? That we don't have a coin-operated God. I'm going to do something for him, and he's going to do something for me. But by the terms of the covenant, he made with us. And in a covenant, there's always a greater power and a lesser power. And the lesser power agrees to serve the greater power. And what does the greater power agree to do in return? Protect. That's in the covenant. That's part of what God has told us he will do for us. It is. So, to illustrate this point, in 168 BC, the Seleucids invaded Egypt. Now, that's two parts of Alexander the Great's empire. And Egypt at the time was a vassal of Rome. So, if you invade Egypt, Egypt is paying tribute to Rome, and Rome says, okay, we'll show up. In 168 BC, a Roman consul named Gaius Popilius Laenas famously drew a circular line in the sand around King Antiochus IV of the Seleucid Empire and then said, "Before you cross this circle, I want you to give me a reply for the Roman Senate," implying that Rome would declare war if the king stepped out of the circle without committing to leave Egypt immediately. Because that's what Rome would do for Egypt. And if that's what Rome would do for Egypt, what will God do for you? To go to war on your behalf. You see, God has obligated himself to our defense by the terms of his own covenant. It's not a term that he had to extend to us, nor is it something he has to keep if we don't keep his covenant. What happened to the Jews? Did he defend them against the Babylonians? Shake your heads, no. He was against them. He raised the Babylonians up against them. He specifically destroyed them and said, "I will not defend you." Why? Okay, Jeremiah tells us, "My covenant which you broke." They broke the covenant. They are no longer subject to the terms of the covenant, which says that he will protect them. Go ahead, Trish.
Well, this particular set of verses right here also tells us that God doesn't do it for us. He gives us what we need to do it ourselves, but he's behind us.
I don't know exactly how to answer that best. I agree and disagree. Yes, in the sense that we don't have, I agree with you in the sense that there is not a time at which God is going to come and kill 186,000 like he did for Hezekiah, right? And the Assyrians in disgrace leave and go home because God has slaughtered their army. So yes, from that standpoint. From another way of looking at that, though, I would say that there are things in my life that have happened that I struggle to explain in terms of sheer coincidence and where things have worked out for the better, where I can see God's hand and where I give credit to God for the things that have happened. On the other hand, to agree with you, your point, we do the work. That's what we're here for. We're his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. So we are the way that gets things done sometimes. That doesn't mean that's God's only option. So, yes, I mostly agree with you. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? We're very quiet tonight. All right, I'll be loud. God wants us to rely on him. So, here's a question for you, and you don't have to answer this one out loud. This can be personal, but I want you to think. How has God been present in your life to protect you? How has God defended you? All right, let's move on to the next point. God works. I keep going the wrong way. There we go. God works with us. Need a reader for Exodus chapter 13, verses 17 to 22. You look like a reader, Cassidy. That's fine. Exodus 13, 17 to 22.
When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, "Lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt." But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. And the people of Israel went up out of the land of Egypt equipped for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones with you from here." And they moved on from Succoth and encamped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, and that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people.
You want to talk about a constant reminder of God's presence. They had a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of cloud by day that told them where to go. You ever read this? I struggle with this sometimes. I look in there and I read about these things, about God's amazing things that he did for the children of Israel, and they turn around and rebel against him. I'm going, how? He's right there. You can see the pillar, right? I don't understand. But I wasn't there. So, I didn't come out of slavery out of Egypt. Maybe that does something to your mindset. But he's right there. He's very present for them. And he's working with them. He didn't leave them alone. He said, I'm going to bring you up out of the land of Egypt. And when he says that, he means it. He brings them up out of the land of Egypt. He works with them all the way. How about Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9?
Hey, Aaron, real quick before you...
Okay.
It's over here.
Go ahead.
Before you leave Exodus,
Yes.
That passage, just reading through it just then, I find it really interesting that it adds in Joseph's request to bring his bones. Because if you think of God's presence in someone's life, my first inclination is always just go to Joseph. It's constant throughout his life and in various different ways about how God is obviously present and blessing him. And Joseph realized that. And then he's seeing into the future and saying, hey, God's going to be still present. He's going to deliver you from Egypt eventually. So I want you to take my bones with you when he does this.
That's an absolutely excellent point. And I think we really have, when you're looking at Joseph's life, that you've got that decent gap of time where he sees visions and he's able to interpret them, but quite frankly, he's stuck where he is. He gets sold off to Potiphar, and he prospers under Potiphar's household. He works hard and he prospers, and it's the evidence of God's presence is there. But God's not speaking to him. And then he gets thrown in prison, and he has to interpret somebody else's dreams, but he gets forgotten about, and God's not speaking to him. And then he goes to Pharaoh, and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams, and then you kind of get the impression that he maybe feels a little closer to things, to God after that. But for a while in Joseph's life, he's having to make some tough choices when God's not directly there, but he still feels that God is present. In fact, that's what he says when he refuses Potiphar's wife, isn't it? He doesn't say, how could I do this against Potiphar? He says, how could I do this against God? He's thinking about his relationship with God all the time. God is very present for Joseph. Great point. Anything else before we go to Joshua? Go ahead, Jim.
In that case also, he also looked back and said, you know what Satan meant for evil, God meant for good. So that gives me the impression, while he may not have been, and this may be a lesson for us, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head here, that he maybe didn't see God present in a miraculous way throughout that journey, okay, the ups and downs of his life. But it was kind of an aha moment maybe with him when he looked back and he was talking to his brothers and said, all this, he meant for evil, but God meant for good. Yeah. So maybe that's a lesson for us to say, well, we may not feel like it at the time, or things seem to be going against us, but we remember that story and remember, look, we want to connect the dots going backwards, and there's where we can see God's presence, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that concept of you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, is one that we can see in Esther. It's one that we can see all the time in the Bible. It's a repeated theme that mankind, that Satan and man struggles against God, but God's will always prevails. I mean, Jesus Christ would be the ultimate sayer of you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, right? Being nailed to a cross served God's ultimate purpose. That was what he was there for. Satan thought he won. But instead, he was just doing what God had intended all along. That's powerful stuff. God is with us. All right, let's go ahead and read Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't assign somebody to that yet, did I? Jim, go ahead. James is speeding towards you with a mic.
Joshua 1, 1 through 9. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon I have given you, as I said to Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and toward the great sea, toward going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
That's another one of my favorite songs in the songbook, right? Be strong and courageous. Great song. Reminds us that what is God doing here for Joshua here? Almost said Jacob. We already did Jacob. What is God doing for Joshua here? He's saying, be strong and courageous. Why? How can Joshua be strong and courageous? I'll be with you wherever you go. Yeah. A very present God. He's here with us. And he's really given us that same reassurance. I am with you. We don't have time to read it now because I'm running out of time because they rang the bell. But when he gives his apostles, the disciples, the Great Commission. He sends them out into the world, and he tells them, what's he going to do for them? Okay, he's going to be with them, and he's going to send them what? I'm going to send you the Comforter. I'm going to send you the Holy Spirit. I'm going to put my Spirit on you. And then, over in Acts, we see the fulfillment of that. In Acts chapter 2, in Peter's sermon, he says, this is what Joel spoke about. He's going to pour out his spirits on your sons and daughters. God has poured out his Spirit on us. He is with us, in us. He's a part of us. We're not apart from him. And that should give me some peace. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of these, but Jacob talked about Joseph, who is in a difficult place in Genesis chapter 36. In Psalm 23, we all know the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Do you hear the peace that David has, knowing that he is being shepherded by God? And then we already mentioned Hebrews chapter 13. It talks about God's promise to help us because he is our helper. We don't need to fear. Be strong and courageous. The Lord God is with you wherever you go. God's presence means that we have peace that we don't if we don't have God. Can you look at your own life and see times when God has given you peace? Is peace a part of your life? Could peace be more a part of your life? All right, let's go ask the 5 questions. How does learning this about God encourage me? Are you encouraged by knowing that God is with you? I hope so. I hope that is something that we, instead of just knowing intellectually, that sometimes we have to feel things, don't we? I mean, there's always a part of my mind that says, yes, God is with me. But to really act on that, sometimes I have to have more than just an intellectual acknowledgement of that fact, don't I? If we believe, if we feel that God is with us, then we act a different way than we do otherwise. So it's an action. All right. Is this something that can be taken advantage of? Kind of, yeah. I mean, full credit to the Israelites for trying, right? They said, we won't be taken to Babylon. God won't destroy his people. We have promises. It didn't help them because they didn't keep the covenant. So what does that tell you about this whole thing? It's somewhat conditional on us, isn't it? You do your part. You keep the covenant. You serve God. You make sure that you're walking with him. And you'll have peace. And you'll have his presence with you. And maybe that's a warning sign for us when we don't have peace, when we don't feel God being near to us. Maybe it's time to stop and examine why we have those feelings. Is it because of me? Is it something that I'm doing that's causing that? It's not always the case, but sometimes. Sometimes I feel distant from God because I know I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing. David feels that way, doesn't he? Over in the Psalm when he says, my sin is ever before me. It was crushing him, the guilt. And he felt it, or felt distant from God as a result. So if you're feeling distant from God, maybe examine the root of that. I've run out of time. How have I experienced this truth? What does this prompt me to do? All right, I want to stop with what does this prompt me to do? Because that's what we're really talking about, isn't it? Change in our lives. This should make me do something different. I act differently when I believe that God is with me.